Lift off.
Hello and welcome to the Argyle HR Leadership Forum. My name is Vicki Lynn Brunska with Argyle. It's great to have everyone joining us today. Just a couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator and our wonderful panelists for this session. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsor's virtual booth at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience today. At any time during the event, you can visit those virtual booths from the main agenda page. Also, to ask questions throughout this session and all sessions, simply type into the Q&A chat and we'll address your questions at the end of the session. And now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Tristan Hack, Human Resources Director and People Analytics, iHeartMedia. We are so excited to have Tristan and our panelists with us for a panel discussion titled Leveraging Data Analytics for Strategic Talent Optimization. Welcome, Tristan. Over to you.
Thanks, Vicki. Yeah, I'm thrilled to be moderating today's panel. And so with that, we're just going to jump right in. I'd love to start with each panelist providing an introduction about yourself. Shekhar, you'd like to begin?
Thank you, Tristan. Hello, everyone. I'm Shekhar NV, and I'm a global practice leader focused on workforce transformation with Willis Towers Watson. If I look back at my career, I have spent about 60% of my time in corporate roles and about 40% in consulting. So I'm able to sort of combine the intellectual horsepower that you need with consulting with sort of the practical reality of being and working in an organization. And I've had the opportunity to lead people analytics functions at companies like Capital One, HP, Marriott, and Accenture before I joined Willis Towers Watson. I'm super excited to be with all of you and share a little bit about sort of my experiences and learnings along the way. Over to you, Ying.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Ying Li, based in New York. I'm currently leading the people analytics team at PepsiCo. So my team mainly focuses on developing advanced analytical and AI solutions to support employees' journey within the company. Thinking about starting from talent acquisition to talent engagement, development, retention, all the way to performance management and internal mobility. Now, I have a background in computer vision, but I sort of wandered into this people analytics team about 10 years ago and found it to be a really fascinating space. There's so much we can do, which we're going to talk about a little bit in today's session. So great to be here and look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, me too. And I got to say, when I met you both recently, hearing about your backgrounds and the diverse expertise, I was so thrilled. So I'm really excited to hear your feedback and the well-rounded perspective. So let's kick off with our first question of the day. What are the most impactful ways that HR leaders can use data and analytics to proactively identify skills gaps and emerging talent trends? And the second part to that, can you share some examples about how you've seen organizations leverage data for workforce planning? Ying, if you'd like to kick off, would really love to hear your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I sure have to. And I would say that there's so much data analytics or people analytics can bring impact into the skill space. A couple of ways I would kind of formulate the answer. One is if we think about from the skill supply perspective, and this really means that we want to understand what the skills inventory that the company has, right? So in this case, you can definitely apply data analytics to understand employees' existing skills. And also, what is the level or depth of their skills? People could say, hey, I know machine learning, I know AI, but is that at entry level or experienced level or even thought leader level, right? So that makes a huge difference, when it comes to think about reskilling or upskilling. Now, if we think from the skills demand perspective, then this is really about understanding the internal demand as well as external demand. Now, internal demand really means that we want to know what company wants, right, when it comes to skills. And that needs to be aligned with company's business strategy, as well as where the company is going, right? So that will certainly impact the increasing or decreasing demand of specific skills, right? Now, external skills demand is also important, especially from the same industry, because that lets you know that, what the future demand could look like, right? So this is like, a supply and demand perspective where the people analytics can play a role. But then once those two aspects are clear, then it comes to how do we match the demand with the supply side, right? That's where you identify what are the surplus skills, what are the skills that we need to hire or we need to develop, right? And then, it comes to the reskilling. Can we kind of turn people's surplus skills into the skills that are, that will be needed to fill the skill gaps? And should I buy those skills or should I borrow those skills? And that comes to this whole discussion of buy, build, borrow, right? When it comes to the skill, obtaining skills.
Yeah, those are fantastic points. And, the one that stood out there was how you identify the organizational goals and the objectives and ensure that the skills that you're leveraging link to those outcomes that you're trying to get to so that you fill those gaps to make sure you're taking the organization in the positive directive that it needs to go in. I love that perspective. Shaker, would love to hear your take. How do you see this playing out in your experience?
Sure. Tristan, it's such a great question, right? So, I truly believe, HR leaders today have this sort of, unprecedented opportunity, I would say, to leverage data analytics to become more proactive in identifying sort of the skills gap and emerging skills. There are a few sort of applications, that I can see, which I have personally used in sort of, some of, the roles that I have had also in sort of, consulting opportunity. The first one, I would say is, we talk about skills quite a bit, but right, if you start thinking about some of the foundational aspects, right, do companies have a skills taxonomy, a skills architecture, right? What I have often found is companies are just not ready with the infrastructure that's needed to do any skills based work, to be quite honest, right? So, investing, focusing on creating that skills architecture or knowledge architecture, aligning that with your job architecture, right? The job families, job disciplines. If you do that well, it provides you with a great foundation now to do, everything that Ying actually spoke about, right? So if you have a clear architecture, clear data, then you can sort of start having this conversation with the business to really sort of understand demand, supply, etc. And what I'm seeing as an emerging trend is leading companies are now using or sort of combining, I should say, the internal HRIS data with external labor market intelligence data. Companies like Lightcast and OrgView, for example, they have joined hands now, so you can actually get. I mean, using OrgView, we could analyze an organization's internal data. But what's the beauty of where we are headed now is OrgView is able to, because of their partnership with Lightcast, they're able to surface some of the Lightcast labor market intelligence data within OrgView, right? So now, if I have a good foundation, which is really important that I mentioned, right? So now not only can I look at the demand that Ying spoke about, based on sort of your discussions with internal folks, but I can also take some of those roles and extend that to see what kind of, talent is available in the markets that I operate. How much is it costing? What's the time to hire? What is the turnover rate, right? So I can combine beautifully the internal marketplace with external marketplace to make more insightful, meaningful decisions, right? So that is sort of one area, and very quickly I won't sort of go deeper into sort of some of the other areas, but scenario planning, because we have all these agile workforce methodologies that are available to us, we know the market is shifting very quickly, right? We all collectively saw how the market changed in the last 3 years. We went from great resignation to probably now, I don't know what to call it, the great stay now, right? People are staying in their jobs, right? So the market shifted very quickly. So where I'm going with this is we need agile workforce planning methodologies. So the infrastructure that I'm talking about will let you do more scenario planning much more frequently and shift and pivot as the market pivots, right? So you can do that. And finally, I would say sort of, where you have gaps, we used to go hire and buy talent. You mentioned that, but I think there is a huge opportunity for us to look at our internal talent and look at the transferability of skills and train people that you already have on the bench where you have gaps, right? So I see a lot of layoffs happening all across the board, but I strongly believe these companies do not have a very good foundational infrastructure on skills. And I have seen instances where people have been laid off, and then 3 months later the same people have been hired back into the
Yeah.
company, right? So these things happen because they have a poor infrastructure to manage their house, right? So that's sort of what I'm seeing, Tristan, in the market.
Yeah, those are really great points. And, Keys, never underestimate the impact of external market conditions on internal activity and how you can bridge the worlds of external data and what's happening out there in the ether with your internal company activity and look at the relationships between those things so you can make really smart decisions. I think those are very, very excellent points. And it's a great segue into, the next question, which is really around taking action on insight. So the question here is, how can HR leaders ensure that data-driven insights that they translate into real, actionable talent strategies? And would love to hear, from you both some of the challenges that you faced in moving from analytics to execution and how you overcome some of those challenges. Ying, let me go back to you here.
Sure, sure. So there are a couple of things I would say, to ensure the translation of insights into real actions. One thing is that I would definitely say to start with a real use case, solving a real world problem. So you know upfront that what you will develop will have a real value in the end, right? And the second is that co-define the use case with the key stakeholders and the target users at the very beginning of the project so that you never lose the sight that whatever is going to be developed or the solution or insight need to be fed into a downstream application or integrated into an existing workflow. So that way, it's a guarantee that the insights will translate into a real use or real action. So this is not really that technical, but I think these are really very important aspects from my personal experience. So your second question about challenge, right? So yes, I do have experienced the challenges along the way. One thing is that definitely to build the data trust first. And especially if the solutions you develop has an AI component, under hood. In that case, people sometimes will question, the trustworthy of the data, and they will be hesitant to use the data. And then, the power of the data or insights will be lost, right? So definitely try everything you can to build the data trust first with the target users. And also, start with a function or business group, which is more eager to try out new things. For the group that they are more eager to embrace the technology, to leverage the insights, start with them, right? Develop the prototype, make the work, build a success story. And then, the words will be spread, and then you can expand it to other business units. I think that kind of worked out from my personal experience. A second is, definitely you need a very strong stakeholders. Bring them on board at the beginning of the project and bring them along throughout the project. And they will eventually become your strong advocate in this case, to really bring the solution from analytics to execution. The last point I would mention is that sometimes things do change. Even that you had a perfect planning at the beginning, but things could change. The business priority could shift throughout the time, and for whatever reasons, what's planned out for on the execution side couldn't happen right away. So in that case, I would say do not give up. If you really believe in the value or the impact the solution can bring, be patient and be perseverant sometimes. Be flexible to adjust the timeline on your side, and then wait for that priority to be picked up again, and eventually things will work out. And that's actually something that's actually going on with my team. And we finally, are able to deploy one of the solutions we developed last year. So it's so exciting.
Oh, that's excellent. Well, and your key points there, that you hit on that I loved, building trust, establishing credibility and confidence in the data, right? Collaborating with key stakeholders, bringing them along for the journey, and remaining agile and flexible along the way, so that if you need to pivot, and fine tune the process as you go, that you're open to those types of conditions. So I love your response, and Shaker, would love to hear your experience and feedback in this area as well. What are some of the ways that you've driven these results and kind of got buy-in, and any challenges that you've had along the way that you've solved?
Yeah, a lot of things that Ying, already mentioned. It resonates really well with me as well, Tristan. What I would say is, in my experience, when I was starting out as a junior analyst, I've been doing this for a very long time. You can probably say, see my gray hair. So the culture in which you operate, right? The culture of the company uh, sort of determines whether your analysis is going to get accepted, right? A lot of companies just most a lot of companies operate more on intuition than based on data and insights, right? I have been fortunate in my career that I had an opportunity to work for companies that had a very data driven culture to begin with, right? So if I think about a company like Capital One, which is handing out a lot of these credit card related loans, you know human beings are not looking at your credit card applications to make a decision whether to approve your credit card, right? So we were already using, this is 20 years back, algorithms were taking those decisions, whether somebody should be approved, what should be the credit limit, should that go up or down. So my point is, the company was built based on data and analytics. What we did then at that time was we expanded the analytics, the infrastructure that we already had, to finance, to operations, to HR, right? So the infrastructure and the culture existed. So it was easier for me as I started doing analytics and HR to present my findings to sort of stakeholders who were used to looking at data in other setting. They actually welcomed somebody who was coming into the room with data and analytics. So I became the go-to person at Capital One within no time within HR, right? So I remember my CHRO going into a room full of director pluses, and I was a manager at that time. So there was, he wanted to know how many people we have in different parts of the organization and what our projection rates were. I still remember, the team said, "Oh, this is a director plus in a room, but the only person who knows the answer is Shaker, who's not in the room because he's not a director." And I was made the director after that meeting, believe it or not. They said, "We need the data guy, in the room." Right? So what I'm trying to say is, the credibility with data is so powerful. It gets you the seat in the table with the senior leaders, right? So that is how you sort of build your credibility, by providing the insights, making it actionable. But I will also sort of add, over the years, how have I evolved, right? My thinking. See, the world understands the language of uh, money, right? Or dollars, or whatever you want, the currency, right? HR is very qualitative. If you translate whatever the benefits are, whether it is retaining folks, higher engagement, better skills gap, better matching, faster time to productivity, if you can quantify all that into dollar terms, your business leaders immediately get it, right? If you show them the money, they will come, right? That has been sort of my big experience over the years. That's what I do now. I build business cases to make change happen, right? That's one thing I would say. Second, I also think about the most critical meetings that a senior leader, HR leader goes to, and then I ask them, hey, if I what kind of what decisions did you make in that meeting? And can you tell me what kind of information would have been valuable if you had the magic wand? What could I have given you so that you would have made better decisions? So I constantly have that discussion, and then I try to provide that information going forward, right? So it's like a continuous loop. So I try to get better and better. So that's sort of how, when I was in corporate roles, I tried to sort of, make my analysis more actionable, right? Because that's the connection. And challenges, I've made many mistakes in my career. I spent almost $2 million, back in the days, setting up an OBIEE engine. It was an Oracle, nothing against Oracle, but fancy people analytics platform. But unfortunately, no one used it. Right. So, Ying, you mentioned sort of, the change management aspect of it. I did not realize the
Mm.
importance of change management early in my career. I wish I had known what I know today. So investing a lot of time upfront, before you develop your platforms, think about the stakeholders, think about the users, think about where they are in their maturity curve. We have to meet our clients where they are, right? I might be thinking, predictive analytics, AI, machine learning algorithm, it's going to throw out, really complicated stuff. If my HR business partners are not ready to consume that information, and they are the ones who are going to be interacting with your business leaders every day, right? If they don't understand it, nobody is going to use it, right? So that realization came unfortunately a little later in my career. Now I make sure I think about change management on day one, not after I launch a
Yeah.
platform or a product, right? So those are some of the things I thought I would share with this community.
Well, thanks
That's
for sharing that. Oh, go for it, Ying.
Oh yeah, sorry, Tristan. I just want to comment on that. I think that's the great point, Shaker. The driving adoption through the change management. This is last mile, but it's, I guess, one of the most important miles throughout the whole journey. Yeah, from analytics to execution. Yeah.
Well, and it's great feedback because, when you have a panel like this and you can share something that you didn't know back in the day and that you learn now, that helps other people go, oh, I need to think about that in my career and I can maybe avoid those same pitfalls. And that's the beauty of having these conversations. So appreciate that story. Also really appreciate restructuring the conversation around revenue and the language of the business and speaking to the business in terms that they'll understand and see value in. Sometimes you can speak in revenue terms and other KPIs in HR might be leading indicators, like turnover or hires, but you go, well, what does that mean in terms of revenue? So having the conversation around dollar figures and a little bit of the finance angle, that it's a really strong approach, I think. And, it's a great way that we can get into the next area, which is really around metrics. That's kind of what we started talking about at the tail end there. So, for this next question, thinking about metrics, what key metrics have you found to be most effective in quantifying the impact of talent initiatives on business outcomes? And then how do you communicate those insights to executive leadership to inspire action, and secure buy-in and get investment? Shekhar, I know you touched on a little bit, but would love to get into that even further and go, what are the actual KPIs that you're looking at there?
Sure. If I go first this time, what I would say is, I typically look at the associate life cycle, right? Metrics can be defined in a few different ways, right? So one way to look at it is the associate life cycle. You think about, recruiting, and unfortunately, again, I want to qualify here to look at the effectiveness metrics and efficiency metrics together, right? Pardon my language, you can churn out a lot of reports, right, very quickly, very efficiently, but it's a piece of junk, right? No, that no one wants to use. That's not a good use of your time, right? So balancing sort of the effectiveness metrics and efficiency metrics is important. I'll give you an example from recruiting, right? Over the last 10-15 years, more and more companies have been focused on what is my time to hire and cost per hire, right? Those were sort of two metrics we were obsessed about. But unfortunately, the real metric I think we should be looking at is quality of hire, for example, right? So I used to work for Accenture, and we had like 400, 500,000 people. We were recruiting 100,000 people every year. So imagine if the quality of the people went down. Just think about it. And then we actually were running 20% turnover rates. So you could be rebuilding your company in 4 to 5 years. If my quality went down, I would be, right, building a terrible company. The impact of these kinds of decisions are huge. But the problem is, hey, do we feel comfortable measuring quality of hire? How do I measure it? It's a more subjective thing. It's not easy, right? So then you have to put a lot of thought in trying to define, how would I measure quality, right? So there are different ways to do it. You can look at, you can do a survey, 30, 60-day survey, get some initial feedback about a person. You can wait 12 months to get the performance reviews, etc. Or you could ask a simple question to the hiring manager: would you rehire this person, in your next job, right? Things like, there are ways to get around it. So, right. So thinking, I just wanted to give you that example. And then if I go to learning and development, a lot of it is about the ROI of your investment, right? It's not about, I went to, a lot of companies measure the tier one metrics in the sense that I went to this training, and the speaker was great, right? I had a great time. He was a funny speaker. That's great. He was funny. You had a good time. But whatever you learned in that session, are you able to apply in your job and make a difference and produce, either, help the top line or the bottom line, is sort of the real metric that we should be looking at, right? So when it comes to learning and development, look at the impact the trainings had and the amount of money that you spend. Rank order your training programs and try to be very conscious and critical about the training programs that don't add value, right? So that's another performance management. We spend a lot of time writing performance reviews, but if you look at the distribution, I have seen 5-point scales, right? But the only scale that gets used is, no one uses 1 to 3, the first three. They don't use, they only use like, a 3 or a 4, right? I mean, out of a 5-point scale, people only use two ratings. I don't know if you all can sort of, if you have experienced similar things. But my point is, be very critical about the metrics that you choose. And we have to sort of also, again, create a process, a foundational structure that allows you to measure things that are going to be meaningful, right? So, those are some of the ones. I mean, I can go on and on this topic. This topic is really close to my heart, and I can talk about metrics for the next 8 hours. I know we don't have that. Why don't I ask Ying to share a few that you're closer to your heart?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I totally echo what you said, Shaka. Definitely 100% agree with your point. Indeed, what key metrics to use really depends on the actual use case, and what is the ultimate goal you want to achieve through those measurements, right? Now, Shaka, you have given a lot of examples already. Just to add on that, I will share 2 examples. One is, we have a solution which predicts in price attrition risk, for the next 12 months. Now, for that particular solution, our KPI is really to measure from the impact perspective, because we expect that our HR leaders will use the prediction risk and take actions upon it, right? So those actions could be, I design a proactive retention program, which could be monetary based, or it could be non-monetary based, such as, I conduct stay interviews. I have career conversations with my top talents who have a high risk to leave the company. or even stretch assignment, right? So our purpose is that, hey, we want to measure what is the impact, what do we gain after those actions have been taken based on our attrition risk. So we designed like control versus test, right? Based on the actions take, and then we measure, do we indeed see reduced attrition for the test group, for whom actions being taken, right? So that will really, and then you can translate that reduced attrition rate to some cost savings, right? Because it's very expensive when you lose, especially your top talents, right? So that's kind of one of the KPIs we use for that particular solution we developed. Another example I want to use is in the learning space. Shaki mentioned about, hey, measure those transactional metrics, right? How many people attended the take the course, right? Or even sometimes they have those surveys after the program. But one example I'm going to share is that we have an internal onboarding program for our senior executives. Now, one of the purposes of that onboarding program is for them, to get to know each other, to know about the business, right? In a faster way. So one of the metrics we measured after this program is we want to see whether their internal organization network has grown, and compared to some another cohort which hasn't gone through this onboarding program. And that, does show, through this onboarding program, they tend to grow their personal network in a much faster way, and cross functions, cross business. So that kind of, going back to my point, you want to kind of design the metrics really based on the ultimate goal of that particular solutions or programs that you designed. And the better yet, think that people analytics, we wanted to be in the strategic partners for other, center of excellence within HR, right? So you wanted to be able to shape their design of the programs or design of the solutions. So and in that case, you can kind of co-define what is the metrics that we want to measure ultimately once this program or solutions is deployed or launched. So that's even better way, instead of thinking about metrics after the program has been launched, right? So that's kind of, a few things I want to point out here.
Yeah, Yang, I just want to say, both of your examples, right? I mean, they follow the design of experiments, right? So you're looking at a test and a control, right? I think that's a perfect way to measure things. And unfortunately, in HR, we don't get a lot of opportunities to do a test and control, but wherever
Yeah.
you can, that's sort of, I really liked what you said. I mean, that's like the perfect measure if you can actually do it.
Yeah, that's depends on the program. Yes.
I completely agree, Shaker. I was thinking the same thing. I go in marketing, test and control,
Yeah.
test and learn cultures. In HR, it's challenging, but Ying, what a way to, to build the metrics that align with the goal and find those opportunities so you can really quantify the impact of the things that you're working on. So thanks for sharing that. We have about a minute and a half before we get into the Q&A portion. So we'll go about 40 seconds each on this last one, but for each of you, what's next in workforce optimization? What are some of the trends that you're seeing? Ying, if you want to kick this one off this time, would love to hear from you. What do you see coming up?
Yeah, I would want to talk about, mention about this AI agent. I guess everybody's talking about the AI agent, and the people even say 2025 is the year of agent. So I'm really excited about that. But on the other hand, I'm sort of kind of wondering, how things will play out. Because thinking about, you have all those agents running, or probably not running around, but they are running, and you have to work with the agent, human with the agent, right? And then all those typical HR tasks will come up. Do we need to manage those agents? Do we need to manage their performance, right? Do we need to coordinate those agents to bring the best out of them? So I think, once this agent concept really fly, there are a sequence of things that will follow, that we need to kind of think through. But this is kind of what's on my mind.
Excellent. Shaker, any final thoughts before we go into Q&A?
Yeah, what I would say is uh, employee experience is sort of an overarching umbrella for me. I think we have a lot that we can do from an HR perspective. If you think about the consumer-like experiences that we have while interacting with, let's say, an Amazon, Spotify, Uber, right? I feel like same kind of consumer-like experiences can be created, within HR. So the digital technologies is sort of how you interact with the technology, but it is all powered by analytics behind the scene. So this community, right? So people who are interested, have a role in sort of designing people analytics solutions. Think about how can I personalize employee experiences using people analytics, right? So things like, think about the amount of time we spend working versus the time you spend sleeping or interacting with your friends, family, with kids. I can bet you're probably spending more time at work than you are doing all these other things. And still, think about, in places where you work, when is the last time you got a recommendation that said, hey, Ying, you are interested in this area. You should be taking these courses. You are interested in growing your career in this particular area. How about you connect with these mentors who could actually take your career to the next level? Right? These are all the projects that, Tristan, you should be working on because, you have a passion to be a DJ, in the evenings, right? So think about those things. We are at a point, at a turning point where the data sets exist, right? It is about, and even the algorithms actually exist in the consumer space. So the challenge, that to the challenge to this community is why can we not create those consumer-like experiences with all the data sets that we have access to for our employees internally, right? So that's what I'm excited about. I think that's where the world is going, creating more personalized employee experiences for the employees that we have in our organization.
Excellent point. Personalization. You're speaking the marketing language. I love it. For all the audience, David Green had just posted about this, I think a few days ago on LinkedIn and had a really nice article about personalization opportunities. And Shikhar, what you were saying mirrors the sentiment in the article. I'd encourage everyone to check that out. It really unpacks, Shikhar, the vision you were painting out right there. With the last, 5 to 6 minutes here, we're going to take questions from the audience who's been watching. Thanks for everyone submitting questions. We'll get through as many as we can. The first question, what role does real-time data play in proactive workforce planning, and how can organizations effectively integrate it into their HR strategy? Ying, what are your thoughts on that question and anything you're seeing that could be done?
Yeah, one thing that immediately comes to my mind when speaking of the real-time data, I would say the attrition data. And so definitely, companies, they monitor the attrition data, right? I don't know if it is on a databases, but really, very frequently. So one way really to leverage that and fold it into the proactive workforce planning is this, into the strategic workforce planning from the talent flow perspective, right? You have the inflow, outflow, and outflow, the attrition is a part of this outflow picture. So you wanted to understand the volume of the attritions, and then you can leverage that to forecast, right? To forecast what will be the estimated attrition rate for the next month or next quarter, and then also take into account from the talent inflow perspective, the hirings, the promotions, right? So that will kind of give you a good problem settings, if you will, when when it comes to the workforce planning.
Thank you. Good insights there. And Shekhar, I'm going to punt this next question your
Sure.
way. The
Sure.
question is, what are some of the most common biases that arise in talent analytics? And how do you think organizations can mitigate them?
That's an excellent question. right? So, again, I may not be able to rattle off all the correct technical names for the different biases, but let me use layman's language. So when you're using, see, I mean, one of the biggest biases that we have is we use existing data to make predictions about the future, right? So every model does that, right? A model is not real, right? Model is, that's why we call it a model. It's a model because it is a sample from your population. So you're building a model, with the sample data that you have, right? The question that we have to always ask is the sample that you're choosing, is it truly representing the population, right? So that is the biggest bias that we have in doing any kind of analysis. You have to have enough sample size, and you have to take enough precautions to make sure the samples that you're choosing is representative, whether it is based on diversity and inclusion metrics that you're looking at. If you're looking at performance, make sure you're using, not just the professional full-time employees. You may have hourly employees. So making sure the inferences that you are drawing are are representative of the populations that you are trying to predict on, if that makes sense. That is sort of the biggest bias that I see, right? You have some data, you plot a couple of charts, and then you say, oh yeah, this group looks different from the other one, right? Is it statistically significant is the question that I would ask. The other thing to think about is causality. Two things are correlated, that doesn't mean that one thing actually caused the other thing, right? Making that leap of faith when you look at data to say these, this is causal, is a big bias that we have to be careful about. So those are the two things that I really care about when I'm doing the analysis.
Well, thank you for sharing again. Strong insights and really valuable for folks to hear your perspective there. And with the last couple minutes, Ying, we'll get to probably one more question here. This question is, how can HR leaders ensure that data-driven decision making remains ethical and inclusive? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, great question. This is very close to my heart. So I would say the first and foremost thing is for an organization to establish guidelines and the policies on responsive use of AI technology to really make sure that everybody is aware of AI ethics and they take it very seriously in their work. And this is particularly crucial to HR because every data point that we are dealing with represents a human, right, behind. And then under this AI ethics framework, then I would emphasize the AI transparency, AI fairness, and the AI explainability. And the transparency means that AI is not a black box. We need to demystify that, right? We need to make sure people understand how it works, what are the factors, being fed into the models, right? And why it is making recommendations or predictions as it is making, right? So that's kind of the transparency aspect. Fairness, Shekha kind of touched upon a little bit. You do not want to introduce unconscious bias into this whole, prediction decision making process, right? So you need to have metrics in place in this case to measure those unconscious bias against, unprivileged groups in terms of gender, ethnicity, age, and so on. And then the last thing is AI explainability, which means that you want to be able to explain. You want to be able to explain to the peoples why it is saying, yes or no, based on the models behind.
Yeah, excellent feedback. Well, and thank you both for answering the questions from the audience. We're right at time, so I feel like we could go on for hours. I'm like, if I had a bowl of tortilla chips and 5 pounds of queso, listening to you two with a snack would be like a birthday to me. This is a really enjoyable session, and you've had so much to offer. So thank you, Vicky. Back to you. I think we're right at time.
Yes, unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you, Ying. Thank you, Shaker and Tristan. What a wonderful, insightful, and super practical panel discussion. I want to thank everyone for joining us today for this session. And this session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. And our next session will begin at 12:25 p.m. Eastern Time, and that'll be a thought leadership titled AI-Powered Employee Service for HR. Please click on the join button that will appear on your screen to be redirected to that session. We look forward to seeing you there. Thank you all again.